We're looking at Parshas Miketz, but before we get into that, since it's Chanukah, I wanted to just spend a few minutes to speak about that. Because I think that for the most part, many of us have a bit of a misunderstanding about what Chanukah really is and how we understand it. You see, there's a number of things that happen on Chanukah. One of them that we celebrate very strongly, right, is this miracle of the oil, right? That basically somehow all of the oil was destroyed or made unusable, and suddenly a little bit was found, and they wanted to light the menorah, but it was only enough oil for one day, and they needed enough for 8 days so that they'd have oil that would be brought in for them to use coming after the 8 days. And it was miraculous, in a miraculous manner, the oil went, that should have burnt for one day, actually burnt for 8 days, right? And that's why we celebrate Hanukkah. But it really, to me, and to many people who I look at their books and so forth, seem to say that it's really a mistake. Because really, when we think about it, what was really the miracle of Hanukkah? I think the real miracle of Hanukkah has to be understood in the historic milieu of the time, which is at that time, Greece was the most powerful nation in the world. As far as the known world is, Greece had conquered it. They conquered the whole world. Right? Not the whole world as we know, but as the world as they knew it. And therefore, they ran the world. And here they come to conquer Israel, right? And Israel is not interested in this. In other words, the rest of the world, it appears, right, they got conquered, and part of what a conquering nation does is it brings its own culture into the new country, and you have to live your life like we do. We think it's the best way. We've conquered you. Now we're giving you this gift of our culture. And they want to go to Israel, and from how we understand it is that in Israel, they got there, and the Jews said, we're Jewish. We're not going to become Greeks. We're not going to worship Greek mythology. We're not going to pray to your gods. We're not going to give up our beliefs. We're going to keep it. And they had a war. Right? That's how it appears to us. Right? Now, first, there's a lot of questions about this war that should make us wonder if that's really what happened. Because first is, the Jews have an army. Their country, they had an army. In general, the army of the Jewish people is the tribe of Yehuda. They were the kings and they were the military. And yet we see that this war was fought against the Kohanim. The Kohanim were the Maccabees, the Hashmonim. They're the ones who stood up to the Greeks, and they fought the Greeks, not the army. So basically, instead of the Greeks, which is the most powerful country in the world, they had conquered the whole world. So you have the whole world, it's like a world war coming and attacking this little country of Israel. And instead of Israel sending its army to fight back, it sends the priests. Right? It doesn't make any sense, right? What do the priests do their whole life? They work in the temple, they offer sacrifices, they offered spices and incense, they work together with the Jewish people on running the daily avoda, the daily service. That's what they did. They don't know how to be military. They weren't trained in fighting. They didn't have any of this, right? So why would that happen if this was a war? Right, where the Jews said, we're not giving in, and the Greeks came in to destroy them. Right? So that's first thing, it doesn't make much sense. Secondly is the fact that the small group of people, even if it was the military, were able to fight the Greeks and win. That miracle itself was an enormous miracle. Right? We can compare this to like the United States deciding to go to war against the accountants in Ontario. And that the accountants in Ontario win. Right? That would be pretty miraculous. The United States Army is trained. Accountants have no idea how to fight. And they win the war. Clearly that's a miracle. Right? But yet we don't see that as a miracle. And then in the actual historic fact, they didn't even use the army to fight. And so we understand that this is really what happened. What really happened is that this war, the Greeks were behind it. And the Greeks went to war to take over Israel not because they wanted to kill the Jews, but because they wanted to make the Jews into Greeks. Basically, they believed that their philosophy was the best. And secondly is, they wanted taxes. You can't collect taxes from dead people. So they wanted to take over Israel and be able to collect the taxes, as well as they wanted to be able to work in a way that they could that they could cause all of the Jews to follow Greek philosophy rather than Torah, right? So what really happened is as follows: the reason that the priests were the ones who fought the war is because it became clear that many, if not most, of the Jews had already converted to become Greeks. They had done it at their own desire. The Greeks came in. They came with the Olympics. They came with their philosophy. They came with the beautiful, the beauty of the world. And many Jews decided this is what we want to do, and they changed. So what really happened was you had a war against the Greeks, right, meaning the whole world, together with many, probably the majority of the Jews on one side, and on the other side were a few priests who represented Judaism and said, we're not going to give in. The Greeks don't want to kill us. The Greeks want to take away our religion. So many of the Jews said, we don't care. We're giving up our religion. And we like the Greeks. The small group of people got together and said, we're not going to stand for this. We believe in Torah, that Torah is true, and therefore we're going to fight against not only the entire world represented by the Greeks, but against our own brothers and sisters. And that's why it couldn't have been the army, because the army, for the most part, could have been gone. It was the priests were the only ones who still observed Judaism. So they're the ones who stood up against everyone else. So on the one hand, it was a miracle even larger than we think. The miracle of fighting, of the war, which we hardly make mention of, was so much bigger than the miracle of the oil. You have to wonder why that isn't the purpose of Hanukkah. All we think about is the oil and making donuts and making latkes, but we don't talk at all about the fact that the story really is the war, that this group of people won. And the real fact was the war was a war against Torah-observant Jews and Greek Jews. Jews who started to follow Greeks. They were no longer Jews. They had given it up. That's where most of the war went on. And the reason that we don't really make a big deal out of the war, even though it was a much larger miracle. You can imagine, a bunch of untrained priests went to war against the largest, most powerful army in the world, including their own brothers and sisters, and they won, and we don't make a big deal out of it. The bottom line is the reason that happened, and we don't make a big deal, is because it's one thing to win a war, and it's another thing to have to go to war against your own brothers and sisters. And the Jews could not accept that. We could not celebrate the fact that we went to war against other Jews, even if we win. Because even if the situation was that if they didn't go to war, the Jews who had already defected from Judaism would have taken over everyone. There would have been no Torah-observant Jews left. Even though it was such an enormous thing, and the miracle was so great, we simply could not accept the fact that we would make a holiday out of one Jew killing another Jew. That we couldn't do. And therefore, even though it is a greater miracle, by virtue of the fact that of this war, it's made small compared to another miracle, which is the miracle of the oil. However, the miracle of the oil, for those who really understand it, about lighting the candles and all the oil, is actually symbolic of what I just described. Because what is oil and flames? You see, the Greeks said that they were coming and they were going to enlighten the world with the Greek philosophy. The world would become totally enlightened. They would understand the teachings of all the great Greeks. They would have theater, and they would have right? All types of culture, and they would have all of the aspects of Greek life and celebrate how perfect the human body is and how wonderful our mind is, and that we're able to write literature and poetry and understand things. Right? They came in and said, we're going to enlighten the world. The world is in the dark ages, and people don't know what they're doing. And they said that they were going to bring light to the world. When we understood that the Greeks actually brought darkness to the world, because by their trying to take Torah out of the world, we understand that Torah is enlightening the world. Torah is teaching the world of morality, how to act, how to treat people, how to treat family, how to treat strangers, how to deal with others, how to live our lives. Judaism's job is to enlighten the whole world. And the Greeks came in with what they called enlightenment, which in reality was true darkness. So the concept is that we light candles, symbolic of the reality that God created a miracle, so that we could understand now that the fact that the Jews won this war was really the war of Torah versus the enlightenment of the Greeks, and that the Torah was actually correct. And therefore, the lighting of candles by using oil, olive oil, symbolic, right, has symbols in Judaism. Olive oil is symbolic of the human effort, right, of what we do in this world. You take olives and you squeeze it and you make oil. It's symbolic of human effort. But the flame is symbolic of our soul, the human soul. Because a flame is the only object in this world that appears to us to want to go up. Everything else in the world goes down, right? If you look at water always goes down. Everything goes down in this world, right? Eventually, everything gets pushed lower and lower and lower. But if you want a flame to burn brighter, right? You take your match, you turn it upside down, it goes, right? It appears like the flame, it wants to jump into the heaven. It's symbolic of our soul, because our soul is spiritual. It wants to go attached to God, right? So therefore, we light the candles, right? And we say it's because we want the oil, right, to be symbolic of the fact that there wasn't enough oil in the temple. But that's sort of almost a silly thing compared to the symbolism of what it really means, which is that this was not a fight like any other war where the Greeks came in and wanted to kill everybody. They didn't want to kill anyone. They wanted to change us. And they were winning. And then when they were winning, then we made the war. The Greeks didn't attack us. We attacked them. Because they came into Israel, and they were taking us over, person by person, and convincing everyone, this is the way to act. This is how you should do things. This is the right way. Human beings can, do whatever they want to do. We're perfect. Our mind is great. Our intelligence is amazing. Human beings can do whatever they want. And the Torah says, no, you can't. The Torah tells us you have to follow the rules of the Torah, and that the Torah brings us enlightenment, and it brings morality to the world. And therefore, that was the ultimate miracle, right? It's just that we don't say it every time, because we don't want to ever celebrate the fact that the majority of our fighting was Jew against Jew, because that's not a good thing, right? Yeah?
I was just going to ask you, the Greek civilization was more sensate a civilization where everything had to be, what feels good, what is,
That's right. Because the human being was perfect, and the human being has the ability to do anything they want. Right? They're the ones who right, for instance, the Greeks, where did they come from in history? So if you look back in the story of Noah, you can see Noah had 3 sons. Right? One son was Shem, and one was Japheth. Right? There's more than that, but I'm just going to talk about those 2. Shem was ultimately the father of the Jewish people. Right? Eventually, over time, right, it went through many incarnations, but eventually it became the Jewish people. Japheth eventually became the Greeks, among others. How do you see it? Japheth comes from the word yafed, nice, pretty. They believed in beauty. And Shem, the name, the Hashem, the name of God, we represent spirituality. And it says, if you look at the blessings and curses that Noah gives before he dies, he says that that Yafes is beauty, and his beauty will be perfect as long as he lives within the tent of shame. In other words, he lives under the thumb of shame. And as long as, what is Yafes beauty? Beauty with discipline is our beautiful paintings, our plays, right? Beauty without discipline is pornography, right? If I want beauty, right, take the human body and I have no restraint, the end result is pornography. That's what the final stage. If you have restraints on it, then where you use beauty in a positive way, you make beautiful covers for your Torah. You make beautiful challah covers. You make beautiful objects for raising human beings to a higher level, not allowing us to fall to the lowest level. So Yafes on its own is very destructive. As long as beauty is disciplined by morality, then beauty will work. So the Greeks said, no, we want beauty for beauty's sake, and they came in, and that's why you had so much extreme, we would consider immoral forms of intimacy with the Greeks. They were famous for that, right? That's why they went so far in their ideas of beauty. Like, just an example, they had the Olympics, right? And the Olympics were done without clothing. You didn't wear clothing when you did the Olympics because the human body was beautiful. And you wanted to show the human body in its highest possible level, which was a person who could do amazing feats of sports. Right? Your body was all muscled and perfect, so therefore they would do it without clothing. And we would say that that's wrong. Right? There's nothing wrong with the human body, but the human body has to be secondary to spirituality. And that's where we were different. Right, those are the two differences. They called that enlightenment. We are enlightened. We're people who can use the arts and the sciences for beauty's sake, right? And we won't sink to the level of animals. We won't do pornography. We won't do that because we're greater than that. But they did because there was no morality. And they said that's our enlightenment, and our enlightenment is no. In order for us to be enlightened, to bring light to the world, you have to use discipline. You have to have morality. Then your enlightenment can become beautiful. But without it, you can't. Right? That was the difference between the two. That's where it came from. It eventually shows up the strongest in the story of Chanukah, where you have the fist going between the Jews who believe in morality and beauty, and the Greeks who believed only in beauty. So when the Greeks converted so many Jews, you have this clash between the two cultures. And the fact was that if you're looking in the physical world, we should have lost. Right? It's like, you imagine the entire world war against Israel. Everybody in the world against Israel. They all decide the world will be a better place without Israel. We're all going to get together, God forbid, and we're going to go to war against Israel. All the Arab world, the Christian world, America, South America, Russia, everybody, we're all going to do it. Right? So who would ever think that they'd have a chance to survive? This little tiny country, and the whole world's against them. That's what happened in Chanukah. The whole world that was known got together and went against this little country of Israel, of which most of the country had already been lost. Most of the people had already converted. Just a small group did it. And that's why it was the Kohanim, it was the priests who fought the war. That's why we don't celebrate the war so much. The only reference we have to the war in anything special is if you look in the prayers, we say one special prayer in each time that we pray in the Shemona Esrei. It's called Ala Nisim. And in there it says, because of the war, right, we thank God that we won the war. That's the only place we mention it. But we never celebrate it. Because even though in other places we celebrate war, we celebrate the fact that, that we went to war and we won. We celebrate that. And we don't want to fight, but if we have to fight and we win, and there's a miracle that causes us to win, then we celebrate that. That's a reason to celebrate. In this case, we don't, and it's only because it was Jew against Jew. And you can never celebrate when it's Jew against Jew. That's the bottom line.
It was like assimilation.
That's right.
It becomes culture.
Right. So that's really what was going on for the story of Chanukah, and why the story of Chanukah is really such a deep, important holiday, but it only appears to be sort of a light, nice, easy holiday, because if you don't think it through, you actually think that the whole holiday of Hanukkah is based on the fact that a little bit of oil burnt for 8 days. Right? It's almost insignificant. It's a miracle. When God does a miracle, no matter how small it is, it's a miracle. But I'll make a holiday because the sun rises. Right? That's a miracle too. But the real holiday is celebrated because we won the war and Judaism continued. Right? That's really what it's talking about. So that was just something just to add for Hanukkah. So let's take a look now at the parsha on 222. Parsha's Miketz. And here it says, it begins by telling us that Pharaoh has a dream. His dream was he was standing by the river, and there were 7 cows. You know the story, right? 7 beautiful cows, and they're grazing, and then 7 ugly cows come out and eat the 7 good cows. And the same thing happens with these stalks of wheat. You have these 7 beautiful stalks of wheat. They get destroyed and by 7 thin, ugly stalks of wheat. And he doesn't know what to do about it. Pharaoh is troubled. In other words, lots of people have weird dreams, but you wake up in the morning, 90% of the time you don't even remember them. And when you do remember them, they don't necessarily bother you. But once in a while, it will bother you. You'll have a dream and you don't, and you wake up and you don't feel right. So you want to talk about it, you want to understand it. What is this saying to me? And Pharaoh woke up with these dreams, and they were bothering him horribly. So he went around to try to find out from all of the spiritual leaders within Egypt, like, what does it mean? And nobody could tell him. Nobody gave him an answer that he felt was a good answer. So finally he goes, right, and he has to go to Yosef. I'm skipping ahead a bit. But Yosef is in jail, right? And he has to get Yosef out of jail because he hears that Yosef is the greatest dream interpreter in the world. So he goes and he calls for Yosef, and it says that Yosef comes, and Yosef says, I can't interpret the dreams. God interprets the dreams, and I will tell you what God says. And he basically tells him that you're going to have 7 years of plenty. That's what the 7 good stalks of wheat and the 7 cows stand for. And then you're going to have 7 years of total famine. So what we're going to do, he says to him, is we're going to prepare for it. Rather than just, what happens normally? If you have, your family makes a lot of money one year, what do? For the most part, people spend it. They think, I'm making a lot of money this year, I'll make a lot of money next year. And they end up only making a lot of money this year, and next year they're in worse shape. It's like the guy who wins the lottery. They're living very well on their middle class salary, and then suddenly they win $1 million or $10 million, right? And they end up worse off. They waste the money. They end up losing everything. They not only lose the money, but they lose the money they had. Right? So here, Joseph says, we're going to take care of it. And he develops a whole system that makes Egypt the most powerful nation in the world, because they take all the extra grain and they store it for when there's no grain. And then the rest of the world, which didn't do this, thought everything was going to be normal, they're all starving to death. So they have to come to Egypt to buy grain. So now Egypt's going to become the most powerful country in the world because everybody's buying from them, right? What they're doing basically is they're exporting, but they're not importing at all. So therefore, all they're doing is they're bringing in more and more and more money, right? But they're not buying anything. So they've got these enormous amounts of money now in this country. So Egypt becomes powerful. Not only that, they become powerful with their own people. Because first, everybody owns their own piece of land, right? So they don't know what's going to go on. Pharaoh doesn't tell everybody what his dream said. So they go and they spend everything they have. So now the people come and they say, we don't have any grain. We can't live. So Pharaoh says, no problem. What you'll do is you'll become sharecroppers, right? Which basically means that whatever your land will now be owned by the government, and you'll work on the land. And let's say half of what you make goes to us, and half you can keep. But we're going to give you the seeds you need, because you have nothing. We're going to do it, but that's what it'll cost you. Now your land becomes ours. So they do that, but after a while, it's not good enough, because he didn't do 50-50. He did 90-10. He took 90 for himself and 10 for them. Again, these people are not happy. So they come back to Pharaoh. This time, Pharaoh says, "Sure, you want to do it? I'm going to own you now. Now you're going to work. You are going to be my slave, and I will feed and take care of you. You don't have to worry anymore." And that's what they do. So now Pharaoh is the owner of all the people. He owns the people and he owns the land. He's totally changed how things work. Right? The only people that he doesn't do this to at first, right, is the Jews, because he made a rule that any priest, any religious leader, is not going to be owned by me. They're independent. I'm only going to own the people who have farms, not the priests. So the Egyptian priests and all the Jews who were considered all priests, they didn't have to sell themselves to Pharaoh. They were independent still. So they were living great. Here Joseph's the number 2 man. All right. At this point, there aren't any Jews there. Right? They haven't come down yet. But all of the free people are slaves. I mean, all of the free people are religious people, right? Are the religious leaders. Everyone else is a slave to Pharaoh, but everybody can eat and drink, and they're happy. But Pharaoh owns everything now, and that was all because of Joseph. Joseph, right, created a new power in the world by doing this, right? And that's really pretty much how the story goes on. But there's a whole bunch of things that are important, right, in the specifics that we really need to look at of what happens, because by the end of by the middle of the story, what happens is it becomes apparent that in Israel itself they're having a famine, and they have to also go down to Egypt and buy food, which means that now they're going to get food, right, and Egypt's going to get money from them. But what they don't realize is that when they come down is that they have to negotiate with their own brother, right, with Yosef, because up until now, right, they think Yosef's dead. They don't know where he is. Right? The father thinks he's dead altogether. The brothers know that he was sold, but they don't think that much came of him. So they go down, and they think they're negotiating with a Egyptian leader, when in reality, they're negotiating with their own brother. And he doesn't tell them who he is. Now, everybody always asks, how could they not recognize him? The fact is when Yosef was sold, he was an adolescent. Now he's an adult. Next thing is, he looked like an Egyptian. Egyptians shaved. Right? They didn't have beards. He very well may not have had a beard. He dressed in Egyptian clothing. So it's like if you run into a cousin and you don't expect to see the cousin, and he's 20 years older than when you saw him last. As you're walking down the street somewhere here in Toronto, and your cousin is from wherever, South America, and you don't know he's here, and you suddenly see him, you might not recognize him. And that's what happened here. They don't recognize him, and that's where our story gets very amazing here, right? Because it begins as we get ahead here. Beginning on 233, it says that Jacob saw that there was food in Egypt, so he tells them, why don't you go down there and into Egypt and get us some food, right? So Joseph's now the viceroy over the land. He's the second in charge, right? He was the provider to all the people. Joseph's brothers came and they bowed down to him. Joseph saw his brothers, but Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they don't. But he acts like a stranger, and they don't know who he is. So he says to them, "Where are you from?" And they tell him where they're from, and then it says that Joseph remembers all the dreams that he had, where it talked about how his brothers bowed down to him. Right, a few weeks ago we read that. Right, so now it's actually happening. So he decides. He doesn't treat them right. He says, "You're spies, right? You're here to come and spy us out. You want to take us over." They say, "No, we're not. We're just coming to buy food." So what he's done is put them on the defensive, and he treats them in a pretty harsh way. And they all want to. Why is that? So the commentaries tell us is that Joseph is trying to see how his brothers are going to act. Up until now, they went and they sold their brother Yosef. They acted pretty badly. So now, have they learned their lesson? They've seen what happened. Their father is distraught. Their family is no longer complete. Right? Have they learned their lesson? So Yosef is going to give them a test. He's going to treat them in a way where they're like slaves. He's going to, like spies. And he's going to ultimately try to even imprison them. But he's going to treat them terribly. He's going to make accusations against them. And they don't understand what's going on. Why is this man? They're just coming to do business. It's like, you walk into Walmart, right? And suddenly the guy in Walmart starts accusing you of stealing, right? And you just walked in the door. That's what happens here, right? And the whole idea is that Yosef is trying to see, will they act in a moral way? Have they changed? Are they different? And it's an extraordinary point, because it takes until next week to get the answer. Right? So it says then, he says, Joseph says to them on the third day, on the bottom of 235, do this and live, I fear God. If you are truthful people, let one of your brothers be imprisoned in your place. All right? They say, there's one brother they didn't bring. So they says, all right, if you're telling me the truth, you go back and get your youngest brother. In the meantime, one of you have to stay here, right? And so they go out and they get their brother. They said, okay, then they go to get their brother. And now there's going to be a problem, because there's only two sons that Rachel had. The beloved wife of Yaakov. She had Yosef, and she had Binyamin. Now, Binyamin was too young to take the trip. But Yosef convinces them to go get him, as if he basically makes them think that if you bring back your youngest brother, I'll believe you're not spies. Why one has to do with the other, it's not logical. But that's how he's doing this purposely. Right, so they go and want to bring him back. Now, Yaakov doesn't want to send him. He's the only son left from his wife, Rachel, because the other son, Yosef, as far as he knows, is dead. So now he doesn't know what to do. So they go back and they tell him, right? And they say on 239, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly to us, and they considered us as if we were spies. But we said to him, we're truthful. We have never been spies. We're 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is gone. That's Yosef. And the youngest is with our father. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, by this I will ascertain if you're telling me the truth. One of your brothers stay with me, right? And what is needed for the hunger of your household, take, and bring your youngest brother to me, and then I'll know you're not spies. But then what happens is, as they're leaving, Yosef goes, he puts all the money back into their bags. They take their money, they pay for food, for grain. So he gives them the grain, and they start leaving, and he puts money into their bags, all the money they paid back in the bags, as if they stole it, right? So it was in the bed. Then when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were terrified. Their father Jacob says to them, I'm the one who you bereaved. Joseph is gone. Shimon is gone. He was left behind, right? He was the one who Joseph holds on to make sure they come back. And now you want to take Binyamin, right? This is too much. All right, so Reuben says to his father, you can kill my own children if I don't bring back Shimon to you and Binyamin to you. Right, so finally he lets him go because there's no food. So they go back again and they bring Binyamin. And of course what he does is he takes Binyamin on purpose. Now why Binyamin? Does he take Binyamin? Because this is an exact correlation to what they did to him. They take Yosef, right, the son of Rachel, and they get rid of him. So he decides, if I take Binyamin, and they say, what do we care? Let's leave him behind. We don't care, right? So our father will be upset. He'll get through it, right? But we got our food back. We got our food. We're going to stay alive. If they do that, then they haven't changed. They're the same people they were when they did this to me. But if they're prepared to stand up to me and say, we want Binyamin back, then I know that they've changed. And they're better people for it, right? So that's the whole rest of the story goes into this argument back and forth of what happens. Now we still don't see exactly what happens when it comes to Yosef saying who he is. Right? He doesn't tell them, but there are a lot of very interesting details that go on. Now, for instance, when Binyamin comes, that we see on 245, it says that they look and they see, and Yosef sees the brothers coming back, and they're bringing Binyamin, and he sees Binyamin now for his first time. Binyamin, his mother's son. So he says, "Is this your little brother of whom you spoke?" And he says, "God be gracious to you, my son." Right? He speaks from Joseph rushes because his compassion for his brothers was stirred, and he wants to weep. So he went into the room and he wept there. So what happens is Yosef sees his brother Binyamin. It's the only full brother, right? All the rest are half brothers from different mothers. He's his full brothers. He gets so upset he wants to cry. But if he cries in front of them, they're going to figure out what's going on. So he leaves. He washes his face, he comes back in, and he says, "Let's eat." They served him separately, and them separately, and the Egyptians who ate with him separately, for the Egyptians could not bear to eat food with the Hebrews. So what happens here is Yosef doesn't want the brothers to know who he is. But Yosef keeps kosher. He knows his brothers keep kosher, right, and that they'll eat things that the Egyptians won't eat, and they won't eat some things that they will eat. So Yosef has to eat separately from the brothers because he doesn't want them to know who he is, because he's eating just like them. But he has to separate his brothers from the Egyptians, because the Egyptians think that the Jews eat disgusting food, because we'll eat meat, right, which they wouldn't do. So after they all go and they eat, they are seated before him, the firstborn according to his seniority and the youngest according to his youth. Yosef puts them assigned seating, and he assigns them by their age. Now, they have to wonder, and they don't say anything here, how does he know how old they are? They're from different mothers. You could have children born, right, from different mothers, from the same father, a week apart. They don't have to look one older than the other, right? How does he know their age unless he knows who they are, right? So Yosef is starting to reveal himself a little bit, that they should wonder, how does this guy know this? How does he know who we are? Right? He had portions that had been set aside before him, and Binyamin's portion was 5 times as much as the rest. So he gives Binyamin 5 times more, 4 times more, but 5 times as much as he gave his brother, the rest of the brothers. Why does he do that? It's not just because he likes Binyamin. He wants the brothers to become jealous. He wants the brothers to see that Binyamin is being treated special. Why? Because Joseph was treated special, and they became jealous. And because of it, they were going to kill him. So it is another example where he's trying to see if they're better people now. Did they learn from their mistake? Right? So they're all sitting there, and Binyamin gets 5 times as much. And the last line of this page tells us they all drank, and they all got drunk, right? Which is a rare thing. They all got drunk. And the idea is by getting them drunk, they would loosen themselves. They would reveal things that they might not normally. He would see, the real people. When it says in the Talmud that drinking, a person who drinks wine, it tells you that the person's secrets. And when a person drinks, they lose their discipline. They'll say things that they shouldn't say, right? So he thinks that he's going to get the brothers to talk, and he's going to find out what they're really like, right? So he does that, right? So then they're ready to leave now. So he says now, again, on the top of 247, right, fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, put their money back in again, right? Give them their money back, but don't tell them. And then take my silver cup that I have, a special silver cup, and I want you to stick it in the bag of the youngest brother. He tells his servants. Now what happens is, of course, as it goes on, as they leave, they open their bags, they go, oh no, we're in real trouble now. Our money is back. He's going to say we stole the money. And not only that, they find in the youngest brother's thing this special silver cup. Now, as it says, Yosef sends his men on the next page down to get his cup back, right? Which of course he planted, but it's a setup, right? And they say that our master, the number 2 guy out of Egypt, who's Joseph, but they don't know that, right? He uses this cup to talk to the future. In other words, he uses it for magic, and you guys stole it. So they say it's not just you guys, but Binyamin. So whoever has this goblet, he's going to become my slave, and the rest of you can leave. So now he's going to take Binyamin, and the rest of the brothers have to leave. They got to go back to their father and say that we told you we were going to take care of him, and we didn't. and now he's lost also. Now both of your sons from your wife Rachel are gone. So that's not going to be easy for them to do, but they have to do it. But not only do they have to do it, right, Yosef is trying to see what are they going to do. Are they going to just say, too bad for Binyamin, right, or not? So this is where the parsha ends, because it's leaving you with the question is what's going to happen when they come back. They're going to go home and tell their father. Their father's going to go, is going to die. I mean, they think that their father will die because he's lost 2 sons now. He won't be able to handle it. He's an older man. And they decide that they're going to go and get him back. Right now, if they do go and get him back, then Yosef realizes they're changed. They're good people. They're not the kind of people who only care about themselves. So then, at that point, Yosef realizes that the brothers have raised themselves up to be worthy of being the founders of the Jewish people. And if not, then they won't be. Now, it's a very interesting thing because you have a struggle. This is an ongoing struggle which shows up next week. The beginning of the parsha really goes into it, of the return, of what happens. But what we have now is a very interesting struggle, not only in the story of what we're having, but also on the philosophy of Judaism. What we have now are 2 leaders of the Jewish people go at the same time, and they're going to come head to head. It's Yosef and Yehuda. Yosef is a Jew who lives in society. He's part of society. His 2 sons are the first 2 Jews to be born outside of Israel. They look like Egyptians, right? They are part of Egyptian society. Yosef is the vice president of the country, right? He's the second to the prime minister, second to the pharaoh. He's number 2, and he's an observant Jew. And he believes you can be a good Jew and be a part of society. You can be a part of society. You don't have to seclude yourself, right? There's a lot of good in the world, and you can help the world become a better place by your being involved with the world. So Yosef himself does this, right? This is how he lives. And he has 2 sons, of which one of them does this a lot, an enormous amount, while the other one goes and he's more involved in studying Torah. But Yosef is the man who's a part of society. Yehuda represents the Jew who says, no, if you want to remain Jewish, you have to stay within a Jewish world. You have to live with Jews. You have to live with people who follow what you follow. You have to, as you see in the world today, you have areas in New York, areas in Canada, where you have Jews who are living in an area that is totally like them. Certain Hasidic groups will do this. They'll separate from society. They'll say, sure, we'll use society, and we'll give to society, we'll pay our taxes, but we want to remain totally living with Jews, having everything Jewish, right? We don't want to have to be looking at Christmas decorations and listening to Christmas carols and everything being closed on Sunday, and you're expecting me to come to work on Shabbos, and all of the things that go on that we put up with all the time. We don't want to do that. We want to remain purely Jewish, and our life's going to be that way. That's the symbol of what Yehuda stood for. While Yosef stood for the Jew outside of Israel who was able to make an enormous contribution to the world that way. And we had people in history. Maimonides, Rambam was like that, right? You had the Abarbanel, right? The Abarbanel was a great Jewish leader. He was the head of the Jewish community of Spain, but he was also the minister of finance for the Spanish court of Ferdinand and Isabella. They actually told him, if you want to stay when we throw out the Jews, you can stay because you're so beneficial to us. And he didn't stay. Right? He was the leader of the Jews. But here were people who got themselves involved in society but remained pure and totally involved with Jewish life, but yet were part of society. You had an Orthodox Jew running for vice president of the United States, right? Not that long ago. How can he do that? Because he was like Yosef, where we can offer. It's very hard to live your life in another world and still keep Torah, but you can do it. And you can offer a lot to the world, and the world can offer a lot to us. So you can do that. Or you can say, no, the world is full of pornography. It's full of idol worship. It's full of anti-Semitism. What do we need to bother with it for? Let's go live our life our way and stay that way. And those are the ways that we can understand the struggle. So you have the struggle of Yosef against Yehuda. And this next week's parsha begins with a face-off between the two. Yehuda comes and he wants to get his brother back, Binyamin. But but on a deeper level, he has this philosophy of how things should be, and Yosef has his philosophy of how things should be, and they come to clash. From that day on, right till today, that clash continues within our people. What is the better way? You have entire groups of Jews who say, I want nothing to do with the outside world. And you have other Jews who say, I'm not complete unless I'm a part of the outside world also. Torah completes me. Torah makes me who I am. But Torah wants me to share this with the world, to be a part of the world. So you will find observant Jews in the highest levels, in every area, in finance, and in law, and in medicine, and in all types of things. Right? And they're true to Judaism, and they learn Torah every day, and they keep all of the mitzvahs. And then you have other Jews who say, no, the way you do it is by being just with us. So it's like, I remember when I was a kid, when I went to Israel, there was a kid in my yeshiva that was like 17 years old, and the kid spoke English with a Yiddish accent. And I used to think how funny that was. And then I realized he came from Canada. In other words, it wasn't that he was Israeli, so he spoke with a Yiddish accent. He was a Canadian, but he had been raised in a city that were all Hasidim. There was nobody but Hasidim there. No one. There were no non-Jews there. All Hasidim. So they spoke Yiddish. They didn't speak English. He learned English, but he learned Yiddish first. So he spoke English with a Yiddish accent, even though he's a Canadian by birth. You say, like, how could that be, right? It'd be like your kid speaking with a French accent. It makes no sense. They speak English like Canadians. They can speak French because you've taught them, but they don't speak English with a French accent. Right? This guy did. Why? Because they grew up in that philosophy, in that world where we only live with Jews. And it's not bad, right? Even if it's if I'm making it sound not as good, because it's not the way I believe. But there are times where you can see that there is some amazing beauty within it, with living in a city where everybody is celebrating Hanukkah, where the whole city has the fear of God for Yom Kippur, where there's no cars on Shabbos, where it's totally following the laws of Shabbos, where you don't have to worry that someone's going to beat you up because you're a Jew, right? And where the government is run by Jews. Everything, right? As long as we do it honestly and we follow Torah, it can be a beautiful thing. This is the struggle between the two ways of doing things. And that's the struggle of Yosef, who became the leader of Egypt, the second person of Egypt, and Yehuda, who was pure within the Jews. Right? That's an enormous struggle between the two. And that struggle, like I said, lasts until today. We still have that, and this is where it comes from, right here. It's going to this last paragraph, right, where Yehuda tells his father, "I'm going to go back to Egypt, and I'm going to get my brother." Right. The parsha begins with a face-to-face battle between Yosef and Yehuda in next week's parsha, and there's no winner. Right. That's the amazing part. No, there is no winner. They come to terms, but there's no winner, that's why this struggle is still today. We have the struggle among our people. Hopefully we're not fighting about it, but we have this struggle, and that's what goes on. Now, just to tell you, this week, because this week has got a lot of extraordinary things with it. This Shabbos, we have not only that we have Shabbos, we also celebrate Chanukah, right? We also celebrate Rosh Chodesh. All three in that one day. Now, it's more than one day, of course. Chanukah is 8 days, Rosh Chodesh is 2 days. But that one day, right? So this is one of the few times that you're going to see that we have to take out 3 Torahs, right? Not just 1 or 2, but actually 3. Because we have to read 3 different parts. 1 for the Parsha for Shabbos, 1 for Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month, and 1 for Chanukah. We also have all types of additions in the prayers. So it's a very unique day, right, where we have these 3 things going on at once. It's a very high level of spirituality because there's 3 different types of complementing forms of spirituality coming at us with Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh and Hanukkah all at once. and it makes for a very exciting day, which you'll see on this Shabbos it'll be quite an exciting day of all of them. So we'll conclude with that. We'll start again next week with the struggle between Yehuda and Yosef, which we'll get a better understanding of as we get to it. Okay?